Joining me is the country's top finance writer, Terry McCrann of the Herald Sun. Terry, great to catch up with you again. Coal, oil, gas, prices for these fossil fuels going off the chart. Why would that be?
Well, that's this funny thing, Andrew. A lot of people around the world want to buy coal, and I don't think they want to do it to put in museums to show people how we used to make energy. I think they actually want to use it, and they particularly want to use it, Andrew, running into a northern hemisphere winter. In the northern hemisphere, winter, where most people live, winters tend to be very cold, and they tend to be very dark. So if you want to keep the lights on, if you want to keep warm, i.e. you don't want to freeze, you need to have energy. You need to have energy that's producing electricity, and you need to have energy producing warmth. And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, if you want that to happen, you're probably going to have to be using coal or gas or nuclear energy. And, you know, nuclear energy is a small component of the thing. So the bottom line, in very simple terms, is that coal is in demand, and our coal is in particular demand because it's the best in the world. If coal assets are going to be stranded in any sort of conceivable future, there's a lot of other places where their coal will be stranded before Australian coal, and that's both the coal that heats housing, provides electricity, and the coal that goes into making steel, coking coal.
Well, I tell you what, this story has just shown yet again the limits of central planning. If these politicians had run a communist state, as the Greens would tend to like, they would have said, no, we won't make money from coal. They would have closed all the coal mines when the price goes through the roof. Just goes to show, when politicians make commercial decisions, don't trust them.
Exactly.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, you mentioned nuclear. He said yesterday, promised yesterday, Britain's going to get rid of fossil fuels by 2035. Big caveat. Said this would mean getting back into nuclear power. Found it funny that the headlines were saying he said Britain will be totally renewable energy by 2035. He didn't say that. He said nuclear power has to be a big part of that, a bigger part of that. Doesn't this show that wind and solar power simply cannot give you the reliable electricity needed for a modern economy?
Well, it's just so simple, Andrew. It's just basic reality. And we've seen that in Britain over the last few weeks, where if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, there is no power. And you can't build enough batteries, big enough or enough batteries to provide that source when the wind isn't blowing, etc. The bottom line, though, I mean, you know, the UK is going around in ever-decreasing circles, though, because although Boris Johnson is now saying we have to get back into nuclear if we're going to get rid of coal, the fact is, and gas, the fact is, Britain is committed to closing its nuclear power stations. And apart from anything else, they're getting old and worn out. So Britain really needs to embark on a crash course in building nuclear power stations if it's going to get anywhere near doing that, and it's probably not going to be able to do that before 2035. So once again, we've got the host of this conference, the British UK Prime Minister, who's grandstanding and virtue signalling, even with that caveat about nuclear, when it's all complete nonsense. It's all complete undeliverable fantasy. If you want to keep having power, you want to be able to turn the lights on, turn the heating on, turn the air conditioning on, you're going to have to keep coal-fired power stations, and you're going to have to keep gas-fired power stations. So that's the basic reality. It's a choice.
But we get the same idiotic debate right here, Terry. We keep hearing, oh, you know, the shop parrot is saying, you know, we've got to go net zero by 2030 or 2050, you name your date, without any thought, even from the Morrison government, it seems sometimes, on how we keep the lights on and the heating on and the air conditioning on. You had Labor and the Greens. Beware the madness of crowds. Labor and the Greens and the Australian Democrats in 1998 forcing through a law banning nuclear power in this country. I think we're the only country in the OECD that's been mad enough to actually ban it. And the Howard government back then didn't have the guts to resist because it thought the public was all for this ban. Now, if this country is serious about zero emissions, don't we have to scrap that irrational ban and admit nuclear power?
Well, absolutely, Andrew. I mean, but the first best option is to build new coal-fired power stations and new gas-fired power stations to provide that peaking power. The second best option is to have some of that base generation that would otherwise come from coal-fired stations coming from nuclear power stations. And there's a whole raft of nuclear stations that you can now have, which are much more focused, much more local. I just can't think of the term, but they are smaller stations, and they can be you know, you could have 50 of them rather than
modular,
rather than 5. Sorry.
They're the modular power station. The new ones have got.
But either way,
Rolls-Royce is building a whole fleet of them.
I guess back in 1998, nobody really thought that we would be insane enough to close all our coal-fired power stations, so we didn't really need nuclear. But I guess, you know, to leave you with the final thought, Andrew, one saving grace might be we might close all our local coal-fired power stations, so we don't have cheap, reliable, and substantial energy. But at least we keep exporting the coal to people who want to keep their lights on, and at least we get the export revenues from that, which can go into the budget, which can then pay the social welfare that'll need to be paid.
Terry, then we'll be double fools. We'll be fools twice over, because we send uranium overseas for them to use, but we won't use it ourselves for creating energy. It's just crazy. Terry McCrann, thanks for your time.